I'm as ready as I can be. Yeah. All right, so we're going to give Jonathan the floor and get started. All right. Were you guys able to check this out? Okay. All right. So you should be able to just run it in the instructions that I have here. You should just be able to run an npm install and then an npm run dev, and we should be able to be on our way. So we can run this in the dev build. Obviously, that's the best way of doing it. So when you load it, you should get this. So let me know if you guys got this or not. Okay. So I've never done this before. I am not really a public speaker. So I wrote all my thoughts out.
You're doing great.
Okay. So I wrote all my thoughts out. I'm kind of going to try and read it, not word for word as much as I can, but this lays out all the thoughts and kind of helps me from not going all over the place. So hello, my name is John Snyder. I am on the front-end UX team over at OneDiscovery. OneDiscovery, we do e-discovery software solutions for law firms. So basically what that is you get a law firm that they want to prove their case in the court, and they give us this huge, massive data set of stuff like emails, documents, and so our job is to kind of provide this software that can search through these things, find contextual things that are similar, basically take their big, massive heap of data and find the 5 documents that are important out of all of it. So right now I'm kind of focused on doing the interface. There's a lot that goes on in how they do things. You have different roles for people. There's people that are just processors, so they'll process the data, or you have reviewers. They'll review the work that's being done. So the interface can get kind of complex, but so can trying to visualize this data. I also like to make games, so if you have a little kid at home, he would love that. All right, so I put data visualization here, and I want to point out that I really try to make this as simple as possible. And Data Vis can get hard and it can get complex to try and even get something visually that's even remotely good looking. So I'm not going to focus so much on visualizing data, but more being able to manipulate the DOM elements around, being able to have this reactive state that you can leverage D3 with. And so I'm going to go through some of these libraries, but I first want to say that data is the basic building block of analytical exploration. It tells a story in an infinite amount of ways, but how do we read the story? How do we choose what chapters to focus on, and where to look for clues? So in a never-ending cycle of trying to interpret data, we need a way in which to try and see the data from different perspectives. There's a quote from John Tukey. Do you guys know who John Tukey is? Have you ever heard of the term bit? So he's the guy that coined it. He's done a lot of stuff. I would highly recommend looking at him. I think that the link, you can click on that, and it shows his Wikipedia. So his quote goes, "The greatest value of a picture is when it forces us to notice what we never expected to see." I like that quote because it really encapsulates what we try and do. We're trying to visualize this stuff that is trying to tell a story in some way, shape, or form. And, we need to try and explore being able to read it in different ways. So outside of that, we have this amazing thing called vision. And out of all of our senses, it is the most abundant in collecting data. So anything that we take in from the world that we want to try and understand, our vision really does a lot. Which in return can open even more doors when combining parts of this spectrum. There's a Semiology of Graphics that's in the resources. This kind of goes into that. I won't try to do it now because it's an introduction, but very interesting read. I would recommend it. So having an interface that leverages these particular dimensions not only gives us insight from a viewing perspective, but also allows for navigation into the data that's being shown. So, we use Google Maps all the time. Normally there's, you get this map and you can get this holistic view of everything all in its place. You can see everything at once and determine, what things might be good in that system or whatever you're trying to visualize. But then the other aspect of this is having an interface where you can not only see this data, but also navigate through it. You want to zone in on a particular place that you're going to, right? So in your maps, if we didn't have this zoom feature, it would be like useless, right? So we need to be able to navigate around, to choose things, filter things out, all this stuff. So having an interface that allows for that is, I feel, very important. Successful data visuals are hard. So there's a lot of factors that go into data visualization. However, the ultimate goal is to gain insight. Data can come in many forms. Most of the time we work with data that's quantitative, so things that can be counted against one another. Ordinal, so they could be ordered, first, second, third. Or categorical, so how many people in here are wearing purple shirts, right? So so what do we want data visuals to be able to do? Well, first we want them to reveal insights. We want to be able to look at it and see something, maybe something that happened in the past that we can use to help us kind of determine what might happen. That also goes into cause change. So if you're looking at some chart that starts to show a trend, it gives you a more accurate detail as to what might happen the next day or next week or whatever. And then also to reveal more charts. So we have these different charts and they portray information a certain way depending on the type of information it is. But let's say you go and make a chart with this data that you have and it works out good, but then you realize that there could be something else in the spectrum of our visual senses. We use X and Y for spatial things, so we can see at a glance from that. That's why bar charts, you go along the X-axis, the Y charts would show the value of them. But there's so many more. There's size, there's color, there's pattern. So when you start to combine these together, you can start creating charts that aren't from Chart.js, where it's just a simple pie, or have something where it can be custom to what your data is. And in my field, what we do with these different clients, I can't tell you how many times we get this data in, and it's just completely different from the other one. So there's no way that our stuff could be somehow automated. We need to have this flexible way of kind of moving things around and just experiment. So map, scatter plots, bar charts ultimately gives us a holistic view at first glance. I think I already said that. Okay, so moving on. And if you wanted to know, I tried to make this look really nice for you guys, and I wanted it to, like, as I was scrolling, this stuff on the right side would change, but I don't have any time to do anything. So this is basically just a word bubble thing, and it shows the frequency of the words that are used on the left side. And this is a component that you can play around with and mess with. So this is obviously dimensions has been said a lot. And then for interactivity, you do something like that. So it's just an example to show that we have a way of doing this in this reactive state. And when we have that, we can kind of do things like this very easily. So moving on to overview. I'm going to kind of go into what Vue is first, and then what D3 is. Sorry if there is some text in there that says, like, show simple ABC component, but I will try and work with this. So who knows what Vue is or what Vue does? Okay. All right. So Vue is this is coming right from their website. It's a progressive framework for building user interfaces. The thing, though, is that it's incremental. You can drop it in somewhere without any overhead, without Webpack, without anything, and you just plop it in there, and away you go. Now, I don't have experience with React or Angular. I have very little, so I can't really be biased and say that this is better than the other, but I do feel that it's a solution that's just very easy to implement to get yourself set up in this environment. So the first, and Vue also has a lot of things, but I'm only going to go over 4 specific ones that this kind of ties into D3. So reactivity. You guys know what reactivity is? Having a reactive state? Anybody? Yeah? Okay. Yes. I guess it's pretty common now. So unlike imperative programming, this way of programming gives us enormous benefits. Mike Bostock, I have a man crush on this guy. He's the guy that made D3, or one of the guys. All of his keynotes are very insightful. I'd highly recommend looking at it. And this is coming from, this example is coming from one of his recent keynotes from last year. So when you have a reactive system, you spend less time needing to reevaluate calculations and more time managing the current state of things while calculations are done for you. So a quick example. If we have a variable called a and it equals 1, and a variable called b and equals 2, then var c would equal a plus b, right? So if you want to change it, and if you don't have a reactive state, if you want to change the value of a or b, does the value of c change? No, it doesn't. Bummer. But when you are in an environment where things are reactive, this evaluation can be done for you. So we'll set up a component to kind of show this idea. You don't have to follow me, but I'm just going to create a Vue component that will kind of replicate what I'm trying to do here. So if we wanted a and b, as soon as they change, to have a value that is a combination of these two, to change at any moment, we would do something like this. So if we went to D3 workshop, and I'll just make a new component just for testing.
Would you be able to zoom in for people in the back?
Yes, absolutely.
And then I don't know if it'll mess up your workflow, but same thing.
I can, yeah, should be okay. You like that? Is that kind of cool? Okay. Is that okay, guys? Does that work?
You see in the back? Very good.
Is my head in the way?
Weird. So I'm getting like a line here. I can see this on here, but this is kind of cut off, but that's okay. I don't think this is, you guys can see it on your screen. And then you said here. Okay. So I'm just going to make this is just going to show the concept, and we're not going to actually use this thing. So we'll do reactive component. And then we'll create just a base here. So we don't really need a template. So in Vue, you would do it like this. So we would have a data object. A data object is a function. It's basically all the time a function, unless you're creating a new Vue instance, which you don't have to. So we'll do data. So data is it's local it's local variables. It's variables and things that this component itself will change, but not so much anywhere else. I mean, you can call functionality or methods and stuff in here, but for the most part, data is used for kind of internal things within this component. So we have a, so we'll make an a object, and we'll make it equal 1, and then we'll have a b object equal 2. But now the c object, it's a combination of these two, so it actually wouldn't work. Oh, I got to return. Sorry, 1 second. So it wouldn't work if we did this. If we did c equals a plus b, right? Now at first, this is going to equal 3. But if at any time I change a or b, this is not going to reevaluate itself. These objects are reactive, but C is kind of a special use case. With C, you would do something like this. So instead of putting it here, to make this reactive, we would do, let's get out of this data object here. We'll do components. Oops, I'm sorry. Computed. And then we'll do C here. And what this will do is return A plus B. Okay? So now this setup is exactly like setting up this A plus B. If any of these two change, C will reevaluate and we'll get the new expression. And this will happen at any time whenever we change these. All right? Does that make sense, everybody? Okay. Okay, so that's reactivity. Now, Vue has this template rendering system that is pretty cool. It's cool at the fact that you can just take regular HTML. It doesn't have to be in a specific syntax or anything, and you could just plop it in there and it'll work. So I find that unique because you could take an SVG. I'm sure you guys know what an SVG is, an SVG and you can make it a, it's a DOM element. You just put that in your component, and now you have a living SVG that you can manipulate, do whatever you want. So Vue has a pretty cool way of rendering templated content. So there's that. Okay, so interactivity. So there's this other part of data visualization, and it's to be able to navigate through data. You can't do that without having some user interaction. So because of the nature in which Vue handles event listeners, or events for that matter, you're putting these events in this markup. And when you do that, and even for my team, we got people that they are not visual people at all. They do not want to do any of that stuff. They know they're really good at all the other analytical things, but they're not visual. They don't do this stuff. And so when you have code that's mixed in with these events and doing things like that, and even getting down to a point where you would have to, Vue you can get a little bit deeper and not do a actual template, but render it out with a render function. But the point is that the interactivity is also separated away from the logic. It's all in this template. So a designer could look at an SVG and figure out what is a button, what is an input, or whatever they want. Okay, I shouldn't say input. I don't even think that works for SVGs. But they could just look at it and see what objects are interactive, what aren't, and also the parameters you're sending to it. And it's been very helpful internally at my job. You get designers that they don't even need to look at the code. They just kind of know what's going on, and they can just focus on this template. So, ease of use. So, Vue is not the only library out there that can do this. But with these simple things that we can implement in 10 lines of code, we have this reactive system that we can start experimenting and do this data visualization with. So with that being said, that's Vue, okay? Who's familiar with D3? Okay, you're probably more familiar with me than me, but from what I got from it, Elijah Meeks, he works at Netflix, but he's the lead visual data guy. He does some really amazing articles. I would put him right up there with Bostock. But he did a recent article called "D3 is not a data visualization library," and it's not. It's a perfect definition of what D3 is. It's not a library for making charts. It really isn't. It's a toolbox. It's a set of these functions that will help you in certain aspects of doing data visualization, or if you just wanted to, make a clock that was a circle and made it look cool. I mean, it really doesn't matter. It has the functionality of doing data visualization in it, but there's so many other pieces. And when you see that, you can kind of realize that when you use D3, you're just going to use parts of it. There's parts that if you're doing a map, right, there's a whole section of all the geo stuff. If you're doing something that's for a line chart, there's something specific for that, or even simple things which are shapes, which we'll be doing. So what it is made out of, it's made out of data visual stuff and geographical stuff. It also has a section of animation, another section for data analysis, and then it has data utilities. Are you guys familiar with Lodash? Anybody? Yeah, I'm sure. Well, Lodash it's data transformation. It's being able to do things with objects and arrays and all this stuff that would normally make your day a lot more difficult. So, D3 does have data utilities, but there's nothing saying that you can't use Lodash if you're going to be in an environment where you're just going to be using some of D3 shape stuff, but you're more comfortable with Lodash. If it does the job, if it transforms the data, and you have D3 to be able to visualize it, then that's okay too. So you don't have to take in all of D3. I'd highly recommend reading that article. He does a lot better than me. So what Vue replaces in here. So if we want these things to work together, what can Vue leverage with this? Okay. So we're not required to use all these libraries together. But what Vue can take over completely is basically all of the DOM utility stuff, all of the jQuery stuff, any sort of interaction. And what you have to realize too is that this is the visual layer. This is the layer that your clients see, and everything else can be done in the back end. And what's great about this is that because of the ease of use that Vue allows to be able to just set it up, you get this reactive system, and you just throw D3 in there, and now you have this way of visually seeing, whether it's a data set or if it's just some shapes that you want to mess around with. You can utilize D3 to be in this reactive environment pretty quickly. So let's go ahead and do that. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. All right, so making dots. So SVGs, what is an SVG? SVGs are basically HTML DOM elements. They behave like HTML DOM elements, but they have some extra functionality. They're mainly used to draw vector images, which is a fancy way of saying shapes created with math functions. So let's set up a component, but instead of doing just a typical DOM, div or whatever, we'll make it an SVG. So let's go ahead and open up. Sorry, I thought I put the path to it, but I didn't. So this is the first exercise. If you go and navigate over to, let me get rid of that guy. 1 second. Yes. Okay. So if you navigate over to views, we have exercises, exercise folder. Inside here is where we are going to be doing all of our code. All this stuff outside is kind of just the RT for RT stuff. So inside exercises, we're going to be going through 4 different exercises. So I'm going to try and ramp you guys up to be able to create a vector graphic or an interactive vector graphic that is composed of multiple components together. All right. So the first one we'll do is creating dots. Now this one does not cover D3. This is just going to be an introduction into Vue and how we can take a data set and show it and render it. Okay, we'll be doing it using SVG. Okay. Anybody have any questions with that? Okay. So let's open up in component. Okay. Let me make this a little bit bigger for you. Okay, so let's look at what this is. This is pretty empty. But what you saw on your screen was this white circle, right? That's what this is. So we have an SVG, and then inside this SVG we have an element called circle. We're giving the circle a radius of 50 pixels, and we're giving it a fill of white. Okay? So if we look over here, we're able to render this white circle in the middle. One thing to note, SVGs and their coordinate system is like way different than what you're used to. If you're just working with div elements and stuff, it kind of takes a second. I mean, it even takes me a second. I'm still kind of messing around with it. But X and Y is at the top left. Anything that you put in there, if you put a text object in there, it's gonna go up at the top left. So it works a little bit differently. There's some cool things that you could do in there. You could tie CSS in there. I mean, you can even give them a display of flex, and it'll still work. So we set up our template, our component with the template in it, right? Inside of that component view file, and we're rendering it on the screen. This is just importing a component and displaying it. We're going to do that later on, but for now we'll just focus on the component itself. So we have this single dot there. Great. Okay, we've been able to render this circle. So let's draw some dots, and we're going to use a data set for this. So for this exercise, we'll use a simple data set containing a collection of X and Y coordinates. So it's an array with arrays in them given an X and a Y. So I've created it already for you. Normally you can have like a data set or something, but like I said, it's really hard to like tweak this stuff, and I really don't want to do that right now. So we'll show you how it's supposed to look. So in this example here, let's see. Okay, so we're going to import data set. Let's go back to VS Code. We're going to go ahead and import data set. Data set is right here, so you can just use a relative path. It's fine. And if you want to look what it shows, it's an array with arrays. So you've got X is -300, Y is 70, next one is negative 150, and the second is negative 100. If you want to know why they're negative, it's because I've positioned my SVG to be in the exact center. So on the left side, this is all negative values. On the right side, it's all positive. So let's import this. So we're going to import this data set. Whoops, sorry about that. Import the data set into our component. So let's import data set from data set. Okay. And then we'll just do that for now. Actually, I take that back. We're going to create a data object in here. So it's going to be data, and then we're going to return one of the objects in here we're going to call is data set. Okay, so do data set. Let me make sure I'm following that right with what I had done here. Okay, good. Okay, so we've got this data set in. Do you guys were you guys able to get Vue Dev Tools at all? No? Okay. Well, I mean, you don't need Dev Tools. I have it there because it allows you to kind of change these variables and stuff right away. I mean, feel free to get it. It's on Chrome. I have a link on the README. Okay, so we've imported this data set. So we have this array of arrays, and we've put it into our data object. So if we look, let's go ahead and save it out, and let's look at creating dots component here. Now if I go to my Vue Dev Tools, whoops, not that one there. Okay. Oh, did I just screw something up? Hold on a second. All right. Let's grab this guy. So here's our demo component. And if we look here, we have a data set, and it's an array of 6 objects. And inside there is an array of other objects. So each one has 2 indexes in there. First one's X, first one's Y. Okay, you guys follow me so far with that? Okay, so now that that's in, we need to render these things out. So right now we have this circle here. We're only rendering one. But circle has these attributes to them, which is its positioning. And it's not X and Y, it's actually CX and CY. So instead of rendering this single circle, we're going to make a loop, and we're going to render out this data set as little tiny circles on the screen. Okay. So let's make the radius a little smaller. We could do 10, something like that. Feel free to change the values if you want. So we're going to put v4 equals item index. I can explain the index in a second here. But we'll do for v4 equals item index in dataset. Okay, because dataset is iterable, right? So we could loop through it. So we're going to say v4 item index in dataset. We're going to set. Oh, I'm sorry. We also have to do a key. So that's why I put index in there. You can look at the documentation for this, but it basically, Vue is smart enough to look at 2 elements and say, these things are exactly the same. It's only the content inside of it that has changed. So instead of re-rendering and adding a new element to the screen, it'll just simply replace the content, right? Because that's all it has to do. So what key does is it forces it to always change, always. And when you have a list of items, you want to make sure that you do that. It explains it much better in the documentation. But that's, when you ever do a for loop inside of your template, just remember you always have to use key, okay? Okay, so the key, we're going to say key is index, okay? Now, if you have a, if you have a data set that has, a dimension that's the IDs, right? So each one has a unique ID. That ID could be the key itself. So instead of doing item index, you could say key equals item.id, right? If they're unique enough. All right, so let me format this a little bit better here. Okay, so we've got v4 item index and dataset. We're going to add our cx and our cy values. Now, another thing to note is that you see here we've got this colon. So this is shorthand for vbind. We're binding the key object, and we're making the value of it the index or the current index that's being iterated. So if we ever want something that's dynamic or something that's not a string, we bind it, okay? So we're going to bind cx equals And then since we're iterating through each one of these items, an item is an array of a 0 and 1, x and a y, right? So let's set the cx to be item 0. So we'll do item 0. Okay? Everyone follow me? So now we'll do that the same way with cy to get it on the y-axis. We'll do item 1. And if I did this right, if we load this up, we should get our data set showing up on the screen. Okay.
That's supposed to be 6?
It might be off the screen. Yeah, there you go. Sorry. Okay. Any questions? No. Okay. What's next? Where do I go here? Okay, so the summary of this. Once we've done this, there's another aspect of this. So what if we want to, when we click on one of these things, have it, if these are, let's say, all the repos on somebody's GitHub, and when we click on it, we want it to open up a page that will go to that one, right? We want to have this interactivity. So this is like one of the things that I love most about this is that what we've done is we've created this thing that renders these, but now if we want to add interactivity, it's very clear where we put this. Now to add an event to one of these things that we're rendering, we have a v-on directive. Okay, so the shorthand for v-on is an @ symbol. So let's try this. We're going to say when we click this guy, we're going to make it emit. Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. Let me take that back, guys. I'm sorry. We're going to do this a little differently. On click, we're going to call a method. So in here, we'll put the method. We'll put an on click. On click. And then we also want to pass in the item that's currently being iterated. And since we have a scope to that, we can just send it along, right? So we'll do on click, and then we're going to put in item. Okay? Okay, so now we haven't created this method yet. Let's go ahead and do so. So we have data as an object. Vue also has a methods object, and with methods, it's an object that contains all of the methods that you can have, as a I don't know how to better pronounce it. I mean, it's kind of the scope and within the component. It's component dot and then whatever these are. So inside of methods, we're going to create a function called onClick. So we're going to say onClick. We're passing the item like this. Okay. So now it should be good to go. So let's test it out. I guess the easiest way would be to console log, console.log. Hey there. Okay. So let's do that first, and we'll make sure that the interactivity is working. Okay. So if we go back over here, what we should be able to see inside this console here. I'm sorry, it's so small.
Feel free to get rid of the last one.
Say that again?
Feel free to go back, make the screen wider, this panel wider if you want.
Oh,
We don't
okay.
necessarily need to see that.
Yeah, we don't need to see that.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry for the styling issues and problems that we're having, but okay. So we have a tab here that listens for events. So if we click on one of these things, we should get a console log, and that console log should say hello or whatever we had put, right? So let's try it out. So if we click it, there it is. Okay. So with just that line, we've brought interactivity into this thing, and it's not. I mean, it's a dummy data set, but this is the basis of a data visual, or anything else for that matter. And so, another thing that I want to point out too is we've made components that are like this, that have kind of mutated as time goes on, and there's some points where the template changes around. Now, the designers, when they get this new setup, they have to change the event, right? So instead of like the old way of doing it, perhaps you're using jQuery and you have to do a different selector or something like that. All they do is they just change where that onClick is going to be. They put it, let's say we want to group these things, so we surround it around a group instead of an SVG, and we need to move some things around, or each one of these circles will end up being a group itself, because inside that we're going to want another circle with, let's say, a label, right? So when you hover over it, maybe we can have that interactivity where you hover over it and it shows the label. So each one of these circles, they're positioned with the CX and CY, but later on, we could just implement a group around them, move the event where it's on click, make it go to the circle so that it's not on this title thing, and we have the same functionality that's scalable. All right. Oh yeah, and so let's do this too, because we do have a scope to the specific item. So when we click on that, we want to be able to see the information for that specific item itself. And so we do have a scope to that. It is item, I just didn't use it. So let's do console log item. All right, so if we do that, we will be able to click, and we will get the exact item. This is -150, -150. Obviously, this is another one. So, you know, very basic concept, but you can see how you can kind of really scale that. Okay.
Is the observer, the __ off, a Vue.js thing that's adding up?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm not familiar with Vue.js.
It helps it watch when changes happen on the array.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I mean, this is the summary, but what we've created is, I mean, everything is reactive, everything. So if we were to go to our demo component itself, we have this data set here. I mean, if I remove the first one, it removes that one right there. If I go and I change the values of these, it changes automatically. And this works with everything that you throw at it, whether it's colors, if you want to differentiate, you know, let's say you do some I don't know, to show the population in US, and the color needs to be more saturated to show that there's more population in there. Everything's reactive. So what we've done above is we've created a reactive environment for ourselves that will automatically update the positioning of our data, of our dots based on the data set provided. We can scale this component by adding more computations, which we really didn't add computations, but we'll do it in the next exercise, that allow for different ways of visualizing whatever data we want to see. This gives us a way to create base components which can be reusable in certain circumstances, or for composing different visuals such as dashboards that would show multiple dimensions of a data set at a given time. So I find this very useful, especially when we're just trying to explore things. Okay. All right, everybody satisfied with that? Any questions? Okay. Yeah.
Are we using D3 yet? We're just using the
This is
SVG
just
stuff
Vue.
from the browser.
This is just Vue.
So SVG and Circle are both browser nodes.
That's right.
That I've just never.
That's right. So, well, I mean, that's an important thing, because, you know, Vue just by itself can really utilize SVGs, right?
Yeah.
But D3, its library, I mean, there's, like I said, it's a toolbox, but a lot of the stuff in there deals with SVGs. And we'll do that in a moment. All right. So moving on. How am I doing on time?
It is 7:54.
Okay. Okay, I think we're doing good. Okay. Okay, so enter D3 shape. So D3 shape is just another library, or another section of D3 library. So D3 shape is one of the data visualization sections of D3, and what it does is pretty amazing. But first, let's look at a special element called the path element. So inside of an SVG, I apologize here. So this should be reflecting this, just to catch everyone up. Okay, so what the exercise that we just did, this is a duplicate. So it loads the dots and it places them. Okay, I guess the only thing different is probably the radius. Okay, so what a path element is, this is a path element here. All right, this actually draws a heart. I think we'll see it in the next one. So a path element is like it's a shape. That's all it is. I mean, every shape is a path. So with the path element, you can do, you know, positioning. I think you can do positioning. There's fill, there's stroke. So fill and stroke, they both deal with miscellaneous styling stuff. You can make them look any way that you want. But the D attribute is pretty unique. Okay, so what is the D attribute? So D stands for definition, meaning the path definition. It's what defines the shape. And it's a string, yes, but it's instructions. So, I mean, we don't have a heart here, but if you look at it, we have this M that's saying move to, and we're moving to this X, this Y, right? And then this is, I forget, I think it's like arc or angle or something like that. But it's a string that represents the what this thing is. It's what the path is. So by changing that value, we can make it do and look like whatever we want. Okay, so in short, the D attribute is what draws the shape you want to display. Okay, so D3 shape transforms this definition. So what I mean by that is D3 can actually generate a path based on the values that you give it. So what it will do is you give it these values. Let's say a line shape would have it would take in values of points, right? And what it would do is it will return back to you the actual string that you would fit inside of the SVG, right? Okay, so let's try that out. We're going to make a line that's going to connect these dots together, okay? So if we look here, we've got, I think this might be, okay, yeah. All right, so let's go and import. We're going to start importing D3. We're gonna render a path that's going to be a D3 line, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So we'll go to connecting dots, and we'll go to the component. Now this should be a basic replica of what we just did, but let's clear it out. Well, I shouldn't say that. Let's not clear it out. We're going to add another element to this SVG. Okay, we're going to call it path. So we're just going to say path, and then that's it. We'll just do that. Actually, if you want to shorten it, we could do that. So we'll do path. All right. So now we want to import this D3 shape. What I'm going to do right now, you can totally optimize. I'm importing the entire D3 library, and that's like total overkill. You don't have to do that. But just to really, get code hints and all that stuff, we'll just do it that way. So we're going to import all of D3 from D3 library. Okay. So import stars D3 from D3. So now we have this whole library of D3 imported. Now what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create this. Whoops, I'm sorry. We're going to want to create a shape, and the shape that we're going to use is called a line. So D3.line is the shape, and it's actually think of this as a generator. Okay, what it will return back to you is a function. So if you wanted to return back some of this string of this path that you want to get back, you call this object. It's not the value of the object, it's what you call it. Okay. So to show you that, we're going to make a new object inside of this component. We're going to call it computed, like so. Okay. So this kind of goes back to the whole A equals, C equals A plus B, right? When you have, like right now, we're going to be adding this line shape, right? And this line shape, it's going to take in multiple values of things. It's going to be taking in a function that's going to represent your X position, and then another function that's going to represent your Y position. And so when you have this thing inside of this computer, the more you build, it doesn't really make anything harder for you. It's all self-contained. I'm sure that there's ways that you could optimize this more, perhaps like caching part of this function so that you don't, like, maybe in a certain circumstance calling part of this function with the same variable might make the internals run again, which it doesn't need to. So there's, you can totally play around with that. So let's make a line generator. So we're going to call it line generator. And what this is going to return, we're going to return D3.line, like so. Okay. Line generator, return D3.line. And we're going to do that. Go ahead and hit enter, and then we're going to chain onto this thing. So we're going to say return D3 line dot, and so now we're going to put in the X and the Y values. So that what these are is you're going to pass in a method that will then return what the x value might be for whatever data set you're passing to it, right? So for example, let's say you have, let's say there's a data set and it's all of us, and so each item is one of us. And for all of our dimensions that we have our age, we have the color shirt we're wearing, we have our name, we have all this stuff here, right? So let's say, this might not make sense for the x-axis, but let's say we wanted to make a bar chart, right? We wanted to make a bar chart, and each one of the bars would represent one of us, and the y-axis would determine our age. So up here, people that are oldest, they'll have a bar that's higher, okay? So if we have a data set like that, the y value would be whatever's being iterated dot age, right? So if we're going through all of us, right, we are saying, well, this guy, he's 30, so he would be up here. So that number is representing the y-axis. You guys with me with that? Okay, so that's why this is a function, because the data set that you get in our example, we're just passing an array of arrays. So it's not like an array of objects that would have properties. So in this case, we could just return whatever's being iterated itself. It's itself, okay? Or I should say its first index would be the x, second one is the y. Same as kind of what we did with the template where we rendered out all the different points. You with me? Okay, so let's do x, and we're going to add in a function, right? And this is going to be, we'll just do v arrow, and we'll do v0. Okay. So we haven't passed the data set to it, but our data set is it's set up like that. It has that pattern, right? So, well, this doesn't necessarily need to be in computed because all of the objects that it's using in here, it's not really using anything that's reactive. So we don't necessarily have to have that in there. But for now, we'll put it in there. We'll get back to the whole reactivity stuff later. So we have x. So x is going to be the first value of it. Let's do the same with y. So we're going to say y, it's going to be v1, like that. Okay. So now we've created this line generator. Yes.
Can you explain the dot x and then also the arrow of v going to v index 0?
Yes, absolutely. Are you familiar with arrow functions? Okay. Arrow functions, they make everything easier to write out, okay? The equivalent of this is basically saying, does that make sense?
You mentioned this context.
Oh, yeah. Would you be able to explain it better?
Yeah, totally. So if you write the function like this instead of Vue, typically use this in order to get the data out of Vue or access methods or anything else. But if you were to use a function like this and put this keyword inside of it, this is going to refer to the function rather than the Vue component itself. So if you're working inside of a class and you're writing like little methods within other methods, and you need to retain what this is, when you use the arrow function, it retains that for you. So you don't have to do let underscore this equals this and then pass that in.
That equals this?
Yeah.
I've done that so many times.
But it also.
Okay, so all right, that was your first question there, and then you wanted to know what the x and the y was?
The dot.
Oh, the dot. Okay, so well, I mean, I'm just going over a new line, but D3.line is calling a function that returns something, right? So it's returning this line generator. Every single one of these functions is actually returning the same thing. So we're returning D3.line, and then .x, we're applying a function to determine what x is. But after this function here, it returns the same object again. So you could do .x, .y, .curve, which I'll show you in a second, which is pretty cool. But each one of these things, they return back the same object, okay? I'll put that back there. Okay. Okay, does that make sense with you guys? Okay. So now we have this line generator. I call it generator because it's not actually our line. It's what we're going to use to generate our line. So let's make another variable in here. It's going to be computed, and we're going to call it D because is going to be the D in our template, all right? So if we did D is going to return line generator, and we're going to pass our data set into it. So we're going to say return this dot line, thanks for the this, by the way, this dot line generator, like so, and then we're going to pass our data, and our data is this dot data set. Okay? So now we've created this thing. We haven't added to the template yet, but let's see what it does. So if we go over here, this should have been added to our, let me go back over here. So we have our component, demo component. All right, you see that? So now we have returned a string value that represents the definition of a shape, okay? And it's all reactive. Meaning that if we were to, well, actually, let's go and view it. This will probably be the best thing to do is view it. But just to show you, if I were to change one of these here, watch this and see what happens. See that? It's all reactive, okay? So let's render it. Let's go and add this, and it would just be as easy as doing this. Well, let's think first. This thing is going to have to look like a line, right? So the fill, we're going to set fill to be none, because we don't want it to fill with any color. And then, I mean, you could basically come up with any color that you want. We'll give it a stroke of, I don't know, yellow, let's say. Whoops. And let's set the stroke width to be something like 5. Okay, and then we'll format that, right? Any questions? Okay, so let's save this out and see what happens. Hopefully I didn't screw something up. I screwed something up, man. Okay, 1 second. Let me see what I did wrong here. I didn't assign D? Oh. Oh, you're right. You're right. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Okay, let's do D equals D. D. Okay, let's try it out now. Ta-da! All right, so now we've got an SVG path, and it is being controlled completely within your own environment. We're using D3 to pretty much calculate what this path is going to be. And so now if we go to change anything, it's still reactive. So if we went to, let me run this guy here. So if I went to my data set and move this guy, let's move the Y up or down. It'll automatically stick with it, okay? So now we can add on to this thing. We could do some other cool things. Now a line is, you know, move to line to, move to line to. And if you look at what this says here, you can see M negative 315, L 150, 100, L. So it's moving and then it's drawing this line, right? So now what if we wanted to make it so that it was kind of like a Bezier curve, right? We can do that. So let's go here. And we're going to add another thing to this, and we're going to call dot curve, okay? So dot curve is another function that you can pass into this line generator, and it does the same as all these other functions. It returns itself, okay? So let's do dot curve, and we're going to say D3 dot curve. Let's do curve natural. It has a curve natural one, okay? So if we, yes?
So in line generator, I don't see any parameters, but in the D method, you're passing in data set.
Yes.
So like where is it? There's no parameter for a line generator. How is data set being used?
So what we're returning here, the generator is a function. So when we specify, well, when this function is being called, whatever data that we're giving to it, it's going to retrieve the x value that way, and it's going to retrieve the y value that way.
Okay.
Now, yeah, now like this, it doesn't need to be computed, obviously, right? We could put this inside of the data object since nothing is changing in there, and it's still just kind of like it's like a factory function. Okay.
Okay.
Oh, you couldn't put you.
So because you're putting this in computed, computed is going to, okay, so
It's returning a function,
Yeah.
so then you're passing it actually into the D3 function rather than line generator. I mean, line generator is still being ran, but I see what's happening
Yeah,
now.
it's sort of like relying on some of the Vue internals.
Right. So you're like you have a computed function.
But if you were to do this instead of method, whenever you called line generator there at the bottom, before the parentheses with this.dataset, you'd have to add another empty parentheses. So we would call line generator as a method, and then that would then return another function that you're using.
That wouldn't look right.
Well, you could do that, but I wanted to separate it. I really don't have an answer to that. This is all, I'm sure I could format this better. But yes, the fact is that you can have a computed object, but a function is an object. So you could listen for if that function changes in some way, shape, or form. Okay, so now we've added this curve. You want to see what it looks like? Ta-da! So now we can add all these curves, okay?
What does D look like now?
D will look like, it'll probably have A's and stuff in there. M, bunch of stuff here.
Decimal points and everything.
Yeah. They also have you can do a round. You can round it as well. Yeah, see, they have C, which I'm guessing is curve 2, which is using some sort of Bezier points to do that, right? So now this is just the curve natural, right? But we can do something like, we can do curve, this one's cool. I like this one, curve step. So we'll do curve step. Let's see what curve step looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty cool. So we can really change around now. If you imagine this as a real data set, we could probably do some cool things with this. Okay, any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
How does it know to iterate over that data set? I didn't see any
You're talking about it actually giving us that string. Is that what you mean?
Yeah. Like how does it know to go through each one of those?
All right. Okay. So.
X, the second one's Y.
Right. Let's here we'll do this. We'll do this. We're going to take this out of computed. We're going to put it inside here. We're going to say data set, and then we're going to say line generator. Okay. I think. Oh no, this is. Sorry, hold on. I think maybe I could do this. Okay, so let me make sure that this works first before I mess it up.
I would take out the curly brackets and the return.
Oh, it's not going to work. I don't think it's going to work because we're passing this in. Okay, let me back up. So we'll keep it in computed for now. But the fact is that line generator is a function. The D, however, is a string. Okay? So what we're creating here is a function that it's not going to be called yet. It's only going to be called once we're looking for this D object here, which it's saying this.line generator. So this.line generator, this is where we're passing our data in. Okay? Line generator is a function. So when we do this, we're passing this factory thing that's going to iterate through our items and stuff, and we're using the same one.
How does it know to iterate over that?
Yeah, so what's important to remember is that d3.line.curve.x.y returns a function. And so when you pass data set into that, that's what's going into the V in X and Y.
Like, let's say, I don't know how to explain this in a good way.
So the line generator knows to iterate over this data set or whatever this data set is.
Yeah.
It knows to iterate over it because we're assigning it over there where it says this.data set. We're assigning it. So really what we're doing is every time data set will change, we're basically calling this line generator thing again and returning a new value. That gives us the reactivity. You kind of get how that works?
I mean, I don't understand it, but yeah.
So, line generator is a function that is expecting an array.
Yeah. How do I know it's expecting an array?
That's the documentation of D3.
Okay, that's
So
what
it'll
I
walk you through, hey, this is the array you expect.
Like here's a good example, okay? Let's say you have this is like a horrible analogy, but let's say you have a bucket, and every time you reach your hand in, you pull out a bunch of numbers, and these numbers can be even or odd. Well, if you wanted to make it so that you only want to return the odd numbers all the time, you could set a factory function that'll never change, right? And the functionality in it would just be return the odd numbers, right? So now you can have that as an object, which is a function. Then you can have another one that says only return the even numbers. And since these will never change, right, the functionality of it will never change. It's getting passed in new values, sure. But that way it always gives you this end result of whatever you're throwing at it. Does that make sense? All right, I'm sorry, I'm bad with analogies.
I have a question.
Yes.
Can we make our own curves?
That's a good question.
Curve step and curve natural, those all exist.
Yeah, they're all preset. I think you could, because I think D3.curveStep is a function.
Yeah.
I think it is.
Okay.
That would make the most sense, because what it'll be doing is it will be basically, I think how this is working is kind of like an ease function, right? So an ease function, it looks for a number between 0 and 1, right, from start to finish. And so what it will do is it will then kind of process that number, and based off of whatever ease, it will then return to you back a value that's between 0 and 1. That's kind of modified it, right? So I think that's what it's doing here.
But I suppose not many people do, because D3 gives you all the best curves.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I put a link in here. Let me find it. Okay, yeah, here's a bunch of curves that D3 does. There's curve bundle. You could turn these on to really see kind of what they do. But these you can essentially pass into and use all of these. This example is kind of cool because you can move the stuff around, but same deal. Okay. All right. Any questions? No. Okay.
Oh, wait, I have one question. Well, it's not a big deal, but is there an alternate way to set up the D3 function? Because I realize that the order doesn't matter completely when you're chaining the methods. So is there a way you can like pass an object with the curve and the X and the Y?
Yeah. Well, here, let's try it out. Okay, let's do this. Well, this would be kind of cool. So we're going to set up this component to have an input. Okay, so an input can't be in an SVG, so let's kind of modify this a little bit. We're going to say div. Inside the div, we're going to have input type, input type. I don't have to do this, or vModel equals curve, like that, right? We'll just do that. And then we're going to put our SVG here. So let's see. Oh, and I think I have to make this, sorry, 1 second. Okay, let's get an input box in there. Okay, so there's our input box. So let's we'll set curve to be a string, and let's see, I had it up here, right? Yeah, model curve. All right, so let's do curve, and we're going to make it a string, and we'll call it curve natural, right? So we could do that, and then we could say, well, the D3.curve. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm glad that you did this, because now it makes it sense for this to be inside of computed. All right. So instead of D3.curveStep, we'll just do D3 just.curve. Okay, so let's see what happens. Curve natural, curve step after, curve step before. Whoops. Curve step before. Okay. Let me show you guys something really, really cool. This only works with Chrome, it seems. Now, animation is a big part of this, and there's so many different ways. Most of the time, if you wanted to animate something to get the most functionality of it, it's probably JavaScript. It's not going to be some CSS transition or something, you know? But Chrome can actually transition the path. I find that awesome, to be able to take a string and actually know how to convert it or transform it, and I'll show you that. So let's do, and I just want to say that like this works sometimes, but not all the times. There's some of these paths that just don't work together for this, but we will do this. We're going to say here, we'll do this. We'll do onClick. We'll say this.curve, right? This.curve equals, and then we're going to say this.curve, this is probably like the worst way to do it, but this is just quick. So this.curve equals curve step after, right? We're going to make it curve step before, right? Otherwise, it'll be curve step after. Oops. After. Okay? So by clicking on this thing, what we should be able to see is when we click on it, it should automatically change it, right? Like that. Okay. Watch this. So we'll add in a style. We'll put in a style sheet. And we'll make it scoped just because we're just messing in this environment here. And I always do this. You don't have to do this, but I just like SAS. We're not even going to use it, but okay. So this path element, let's target it. So we're going to say path, like so, and then it has a D attribute, but I mean we'll just do a we're going to add a transition to it. We're going to target like all of its properties. So even if it's color change, it'll still do a transition. But let's just do this. We're going to say transition all. We'll do like 500 milliseconds, and then we'll do an ease like that. I might have to refresh this because sometimes when I do scoped, it won't update. Okay, so let's see what that does. Let me just refresh here. Okay, so if we click it, okay, so that doesn't animate. But what if we click it again? Magic, right? Isn't that cool? I love that thing. That is so awesome.
That only works in WebKit browsers?
Yeah. I was really hoping that it would be like all across platforms so I could show you guys, but it's totally not. Hopefully it will be. But, I mean, I don't know if in any real application you're going to be doing this.
But there might be times when you want to, well, like, say you only want to select your active users, and suddenly all the bars change because you selected that.
Well, yeah, that's, yeah. I mean, you could benefit off of CSS transitions. It's a good way to introduce some sort of animation to your stuff without having to write some JavaScript function to be able to do that, or any type of like easing framework or anything like that. Okay, so any questions? Yes.
When you say it only works in Chrome, do you mean that specific line of code, or
the transition? Like, I mean, Firefox can transition stuff too, you know. But like, this is trying to transition the D attribute. And it just seems like Chrome can only do it. I mean, I tried on Firefox and Internet Explorer. I mean, I don't know why I even thought Internet Explorer would be able to do that, but
it'll still change. It just won't be.
It'll change it, yeah. It just won't. It won't animate it.
Can you go back to the code for a second? The style.
Yes, absolutely. I'll make it a little bigger for you.
But if you had a production product, would you want to put something out that didn't work with Firefox?
No.
Yeah.
I want to make sure that it works on absolutely everything that we can possibly put on. Yes?
Have you done anything like this where the data set changes and you either from the server
Yeah.
in a collaborative way?
Well, I mean, since everything is reactive, it will work. It'll work. Let me show you.
RESTful API with RESTful
Yeah.
API to it?
Yeah, I mean, once you load it in and stuff, immediately as that data changes to something else, Vue will know, and Vue will then go ahead and do its thing.
Right?
No.
Do the view model thing.
No, let's try it out. I'm going to show you guys, okay? Let's do this. We're going to say instead of a path, we want to animate, well, okay, first off, I'm going to take the data set and flip it, right? We'll just flip it. And what will happen is these circles, they'll look the same, but they'll be in a different order, right? And we want to see this transition. So we'll target path, and then we'll also target circle. Okay, so we're going to do that. And right now they're not going to move, but let's go back over. Let me close this one out. Let's go back over here. Let me refresh it. And if I go to this guy here, okay, so now if I do that, let me go and say vm0.dataset, whoops, vm0.dataset. vm0, by the way, do you guys know what that is? Okay, so this is exclusively for dev tools, okay? You see that little guy there? where it says VM0. So whatever component you have selected, you kind of have immediate scope to. It's useful for when you want to change objects and stuff kind of on the fly. But then you can also, like if I click this and this, now I've got VM0, VM1, and VM2, and you can kind of see there how you can work with them. The same actually goes, if you guys didn't know this before, see every one of these has a $0 $0. So I have this body element, I get exact, like right away, I get scope to it. There's our body element, just if you guys didn't know. Okay, so yeah, so let's go and flip the data set and see what this thing does. So we're going to say VM0.dataset equals VM0.dataset.reverse. Ta-da! It's so much fun. I love doing that
so
stuff.
before makes it obvious that it changed too, because I addressed the transition.
Right. And another thing to note too is that like we're every single iteration of these things that it's putting out, it's unique because we've given it a key, which is why that just by flipping the data, I mean these positions are exactly the same, right? But the order has changed, and because the order has changed, it's not just changing the value of the CX and the CY, but it's actually replacing the entire element, which is why we can see all of them move.
So this part would work in Firefox.
Okay, well, if you want, yes and no. It'll animate in Firefox, but the line won't. The circles will.
The line will just
I think the circles will. Let me double check that before I eat my own words here. Oh, I guess I have to do this, huh? Oh man, how am I gonna? I don't know how to target this guy.
How about unmounted? Do console.log this.
Yeah, that works. Sure. He wants to test it out. I mean, well, here, you know what? We'll do something a little different. We'll just make it so that when you click it, it'll also reverse it, right? So on click, we'll do this.curve equals that, right? But then we'll also do this.dataset equals this.dataset.reverse. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I just want to try this out. Hold on. Let me just try this out. We're going to import Lodash. I just want to try this out. You guys don't have to do this. But Lodash has a shuffle thing. I want to shuffle it instead of reversing it. Okay, so we'll do this.dataset equals this.shuffle. This.dataset. Whoops. Thanks. Equals. Okay. Does that look right? Yes. Okay. So when we click it, we're going to shuffle our data set, right? So it'll shuffle the items in order. This should work on both Chrome and Firefox. I mean, not the line, but clicking these things should shuffle them up. Ta-da! That's kind of cool, right? Yeah, Firefox would probably be a little bit different. We'll probably animate the circles, but not the lines. So let's see. Oh no, I guess never mind. It doesn't do any of it. So I guess I guess you'll have to just do something different with that. But I just thought it was pretty cool. The positioning and stuff you might not be able to animate unless you go into JavaScript. But if you want interactions and stuff, you could totally put like a hover style on one of these buttons or these circles, and keep it so that you could add this kind of interactivity effect without doing too much. Okay, so how are we doing on time? Holy crap. Okay. Oh man. Okay. You guys want to just like rush through the rest?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I did not know that it was going to take this long. All right, so creating an arc. So just like the line, arc is another shape that D3 offers. The same patterns apply, but different properties. Different properties. So some of this deals with trigonometry, but for the most part, D3 will take care of all the hard parts. So one thing to note is that both line and arc are both considered pieces of a shape layout. And what I mean by shape layout is there's these other shapes like area or pie, which aren't essentially a shape. It's not like this thing will give you this one path of all of them. What it does is it generates the paths needed in order to to render them out, right, as multiple things. So an arc, just think of arc as like a slice of a pie, right? Okay, let me try. I'm gonna have to do this real quick. Actually, I'm glad I put this here because I think I might just copy and paste. Yeah, so we've got this. We have D3 arc. Oh, and here's the other thing. So basic setup. This is a little bit different. Instead of just making this demo component thing that's inside of each one of these things, we're going to look at D3 arc as a base component because it's going to be reusable inside of a pie chart, right? A pie component. So we'll have a component within a component that will both be rendering SVG elements, and we'll be able to nest them with Vue, okay? So let's define the properties of what an arc is. So there's 5 properties that define what an arc is. We've got start angle, so where is it going to start? We have end angle, where is it going to end? We have the inner radius, outer radius, and border radius. Okay, so all these things here is what makes up what an arc is. So let's use these actual properties, make them the properties of our Vue component. Okay, because our Vue component is basically, it's going to be arc. It's going to act like an arc and do stuff, but it's going to use D3's internals to be able to generate all the stuff that we need. All right, so let's create it. So we're going to create these guys here. Each one of them, we're just going to put a default number. That way we can just kind of use them and we'll see the result right away without actually having to apply stuff to it. So let's go ahead and do that. Feel free, because I know that I'm running out of time and I'd like to show you guys this. Feel free to just copy it, okay? So we'll take this entire thing. We've got the template and we've got the script, and we're going to put this inside of D3 arc, okay? Now if we go over here, I think I've created it, and it should have that heart. That's what we're seeing on the right side. So let's go to components, D3 arc. Okay, so here's our component, just like this. So let's go ahead and replace that with these default props set up for us. Okay, so we have this path, we have these props. So now the next step is, now we have to introduce D3, and we're going to be doing the same thing with this computed object and using creating a generator. So instead of creating a line generator, we're going to be creating an arc generator. Okay, I could probably, let me see here. Okay, yes, creating an arc. So this is what we do here, start angle, so we've got that. Okay, so adding D3. If we look here, we're importing the D3, right? Just like normal, we've got our props, but now we're going to add the computed object, and this computed is going to act the same way as line did, okay? So we'll make an arc generator and a D. I'll just copy this in here. I normally wouldn't want to do this. I'm just running out of time. So we'll put in computed. We have arc generator, and then we have D. And now this really kind of shows how we can really leverage computed, right? So we have all these properties, and we want to be able to have control of all of them in a reactive environment. So at any time, if inner radius changes, outer radius changes, if any of these properties change at any moment, it will rerun this generator, which will then give us the new value for D, okay? All right, so this should work, and all we have to do is pass this attribute over to path, right? So, well, before I do that, let's fill it with white. Okay, so we'll do fill. Actually, I'll make it yellow or something for now. Okay, so path fill is yellow. Let's path D equals D. Okay, so what should happen is it'll get the defaults here, and it should. Uh-oh. Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes, import D3. Okay, let's see if that does it. Ta-da, we've got our little arc. So this is what I mean by this reactive system is, you know, we have these properties mapped, right? And if any time these properties change, and we can do that kind of, you know, how we did with the line. Now we're plugging this into the page, but we're not passing in any dynamic properties to it. So, you know, we don't really have like normally it would be like base page would have like arc options or something in it as an object, and then we would pass that object into the D3 arc because it's a child component, right? Normally, you're not supposed to modify the props, and this thing is going to yell at me because I'm going to do it. I just want to show you guys that if you do, say, vm0.cornerRadius equals, I don't know, 50, it changes automatically. Let's make that a little bit lower, like 5. Let's make the outer radius like 300. Outer radius equals 300. Okay? Let's make the inner radius 200. Make it look like an actual arc. Okay? So yeah, I mean, this is really what the Vue and D3 they work so well together by doing this setup. Let me go ahead and I'm sorry, I'm kind of just running out of ideas here. If we go to compose this arc, let's compose it inside of a Pi component. So we've created this arc component itself, right? So we can reuse this arc component. We're going to be creating like multiple versions of this arc component, so we don't necessarily have to assign specific properties to it. For example, like each one is going to have an outer radius, and that number is going to stay the same. So each one of these arcs that we're going to put, we don't necessarily have to change the values of them, but you would be able to go in there and change colors to anything that you want. Okay, so since SVGs can nest elements, we can use that to construct a pie chart using the arc component that we just made, right? This matches perfectly with Vue's nestable component pattern, so let's do exactly that. This will also be a reusable component, so D3 arc is a reusable component. D3 pi could also be a reusable component. So we'll go ahead and we'll just start adding this. I'll try and jump into it. I didn't even put it in here. Okay, I think I have it finished. Let me see. All right, I'm just going to run through this, guys. I'm sorry. So we've imported D3. We have imported our D3 arc component. Okay, so this is inside pi, inside the pi thing here. And so the pi shape, it takes some different stuff. So instead of data set, I mean, we're using data set. I just call it a little bit differently. I just called it input datum. And all it is just an array of values. You can get more intricate with this, but this is like the simplest way that you can put it. It's going to count up all of those and then figure and determine like the percentage of each one of these, right? So there's our data set, and we're just doing just a random one. We're not actually loading any data set in. Index. You don't really need to worry about index, but it's the starting point. If you look at the documentation for D3, it's a starting point for where it's going to go. And then a pi has a start angle and an end angle, just like an arc does. But then it also has this pad angle. Now, the pad angle is not going to work. Let's just keep it at 0. Basically, an arc also has a property called pad angle, and you have to send that pad angle to the arc's pad angle. But we won't do that for now. We'll just keep it 0. And then for computed, we're doing the same thing, just like with the line in the arc. Okay, the same thing. We are creating a generator, and this generator is going to do return d3.pi, and then we're passing in that start angle, passing in dot end angle, passing in dot pad angle, and so what that's doing is it's returning back a function that we can use to create these paths. So instead of doing d, which would be a string, we're going to return paths, which is an array of objects that would not only have that string, but also have all of the angles and stuff needed to generate out this pi, okay? So if we were to, let me just plop that into here, and let me just do this as well. Sorry, 1 second. Actually, let me just. All right, let me just see what it does. Hey, there's our pi. Cool, right? So so now we've created we've composed these things together. We've created an arc shape to be part of the bigger picture, which is like a pi. And so now we can look at our setup and we can see that we have D3.py, but then we can also see all of the different pieces inside of it. And we're looping and we're creating these arcs. And each one of these arcs would then also have its information that you could see as well. Now, I mean, this is obviously the wrong way of doing it, but you could do the same thing with this, where you could say inner radius. Let's do like 100. Okay. So it gives you this flexibility of being able to add this stuff. Another thing to note is that, like, with each one of these examples, can you guys, like, you could see the pattern, right? Like, we're creating this generator, and then we're creating another value that's going to equal whatever that generator gives us, depending on the variables that we give it. I mean, this is for D3 shape, but there's other aspects in there that most likely would probably have the same some type of pattern. D3 scale is another big part of this library. I didn't go into it, but D3 scale is very useful, in which you would have, let's say you have a data set and it has all these dates from the past 100 years or something, right? There's actually a data set in here that has that. It's the Wealth and Health of Nations, if you guys want to play around with it. But if you have all these dates, it's like, how do you map this x-axis value to what you want to see on the screen? Because you have this thing that's in dates, and then you have this other thing that's it's in pixels. So this scale thing allows you to kind of pretty much jump back and forth between the two, and using it as a computed property would allow you to change the domain and the range at any given moment, and it's automatically reactive. Any questions? Okay. I hope I didn't go too fast for you guys. So.
FYI, if you want to go a little over 10-15 minutes extra, that's fine. It's 8:40, so
I mean,
30-40 minutes.
I've kind of like rushed and I ran out of things to say.
Questions or want to work through.
There is one thing I want to say. There's these resources here. Are you guys familiar with Fitts law? You guys know what Fitts law is? Okay, it's a UX law, and it's basically, it states, let me just read it because I already forgot it. It states that the time required to rapidly move to a target area is a function of the ratio between the distance to the target and the width of the target. So what that means is, in basic UX, if you have a tiny little button here, right, and your mouse is usually over here, it's probably not a good idea. You should probably, if you were to have, you have a phone, right, all the buttons are really close to each other. You're minimizing the distance, right, which is then kind of a ratio between the size of the buttons. So the size of those buttons are small, but because they're so close together, it gives you more accuracy. So it's a basic law. But and Mike Bostock went over this. This is kind of where I didn't come up with this. Is Mike Bostock. So to actually be able to evaluate this as an expression means that we could code it somehow, some way. Okay. Now, he did this brilliant explanation of how he managed to do this with a Voronoi map, okay? Now, Voronoi is kind of like, does anybody know what a Voronoi is? You could probably explain it better than me, but it creates cells that are pretty much kind of the equal amount of size in the area, so that you're not having this Fitts law type deal. And there's a perfect example of this. So let's take a look at this map, right? We have all of these circles here, but some of them are really, really tiny. Some of them are big, right? Now you can kind of get a sense that Fitts law is probably needed in this somehow, right? These smaller circles, if I wanted to go on here, I don't want to have to move my mouse and be precise enough to make it fit in that little area, right? You want to make them as even as possible. And so if you hover over this, you can see that it kind of works that way, right? It kind of works. It even works on the outside here, right? So how do you do that? Well, D3 has this Voronoi map where it generates an SVG where you would have complete control over these cells, and you can add the interactivity. Now, in this example, it's on hover. It's doing something on hover. It's showing these lines, right? So let's see what this looks like. So here's our Voronoi map. We can see that it's split up all of the different sections into this larger area, which makes the UX much more approachable. they can now click on any of these and not have a problem. So I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, the UX side of things, you know, it could actually fit into what we do as far as programming stuff or even visualizing data. So yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I might as well go through the conclusion. I kind of ran out of time. Like, this is right before I was running out of my house. The shirt was like half wet because it wasn't done drying yet. So I wish I could write more, but I'm out of time. I hope you all enjoyed this, learned at least something. Thank you guys so much for having me. This was one of the coolest things. I've never done this before, so thank you guys so much. Yeah, thanks for having me. And if there's any questions. Oh, I wanted to take a picture because this means a lot. Is that cool if I take a picture? All right, let me take a picture with you guys.
Take a picture of you from behind from the back of the thing.
Huh?
Take a picture of you from back there with all the people and you in front.
Oh, do you want to?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, here, let me take a selfie first. Hey, guys. All right. Should I go back there? Yeah. Actually, I should put like a... Here, wait, let me put a bunch of colors on there. There we go. I didn't write this information out either, but there's a lady, her name is Cynthia Brewer, and these are colors that she came up with that helps, I mean, I didn't really write it well, but I mean, ordinal, quantitative, these type of different visuals, these things work out well for that. There was something that I explained earlier with population density. With UX laws, I mean, you could really blend these two together. With a map that has population, you can show the color as a dark color to represent the density, right? A lighter color kind of just comes off as being void of stuff, right? I mean, this totally depends on the contrast. If you have a dark background, then maybe a more lighter color, a more dense color would make sense. A lighter color it's dense with lighter color, I should say, would make more sense because it shows that there's not so much like void of stuff. And then also the Semiology of Graphics, I would highly recommend reading that as well. This goes through all the different kind of visual dimensions that we can interpret as far as checking to see if things have similarities or differences. Like we do X and Y all the time. Bar charts, it's X and Y. It's, but we have these other ones. We have the value, which could be represented as scale. We have textures, so we can have things that are different, that have different textures or colors or orientation or shape. And all these things can be used to visualize this type of data when you have, multiple dimensions that you want to show against each other, and just to kind of navigate around. So this is kind of hard to see, but where did I put anything in there? I'll fill this out later, but this circle here, or I should say this thing with the sign slash through it, that means that this can represent differences. Whereas you have something that would have like an equal line, it could represent similarities. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's all I got.
Awesome. Very good. Woohoo. So, we have till 9. I don't know if you guys want to hang out, talk to each other, or ask Jonathan questions or anything like that. But, yeah, that's it. So, hope you enjoyed, and feel free to stay, go, whatever you want.
Second one.
Oh, yeah. So, how many of you are part of the Suncoast Developers Guild by any chance?
I just joined a meetup.
Okay. Yeah, there's a Slack group, and I highly recommend you join it. If you need the link, just ask me, and I'll try and get it to you. But there's also, what's up?
Oh, I was just gonna ask, part of the Slack, but is there anything else we need to do to join?
Nope. I think if you just go to Suncoast.io, I think there's a join the Slack link. Yeah. If you go to suncoast.io, there's a join us on Slack. If you just click that, I just think you put in your email and you're good to go.
Sorry. Sorry, guys.
That would have been an awesome.
I buy some coats all the time. Sorry.
Wait, oh, Suncoast. Yeah, join us on Slack. And there's a Vue channel, so there's a bunch of like Vue enthusiasts at all times. Pretty much, if you ever have questions, if you want to go and try the stuff at home or tomorrow, next week, the weekend, whatever. Jonathan's on there. Harry's on there. He's done a few Vue talks. I did a Vue talk. So there's a lot of Vue people. Also React channels, PHP, just pretty much everything. A lot of different areas of programming. So if you're not part of that community, I highly recommend it. There's a ton of other developers and stuff like that. So it's a good place to be. Highly recommended. Am I missing anything else today? What's up?
Someone in another meetup group asked about the event tomorrow.
The event tomorrow?
I think introduction to JavaScript.
Introduction.
No.
Let me look at the event channel. There might be a meetup or something like that. I'm teaching an intro to JavaScript class. That's in the end of July. So I don't know if you're talking about that.
Does the number line up? Is it July 29th?
Yeah, I believe so, yeah. That's the one I'm teaching. I should know that. As part of Girl Develop It, anyone's actually free to join and sign up. It's a paid thing. It's actually a 2-day workshop thing. Tuesday and Thursday at the end of July.
Yeah, crash course.
Okay, no, so this is something else, and I am not aware of that. So this is part of Suncoast Developers Guild. Jason Perry's teaching a crash course, Intro to JavaScript, tomorrow at 12 p.m. Suncoast Developers Guild now has a new location. Before we used to meet up at the Iron Yard, then the Iron Yard closed down. So we have a new location. It's on Central. I haven't visited, but 2220 Central Avenue. So on the west side. So that should be cool. Now we have a dedicated space. So that's probably where a lot of these meetups are going to be now.
What's the idea of Suncoast Developers Guild? Is it all about the Slack, or is there more to it?
To my knowledge, I am not sure, really.
So it's a meetup space.
Mm-hmm.
It's also we know that, right? Is that right?
What's that? I'm sorry.
There's something about an academy.
Yeah, they also have like a school now. I think it's part of some of the people who were involved with the Iron Yard are now doing the Suncoast Developer Academy thing. So I don't fully know how everything is linked together. So it's a free community, but there's also like a code school involved and whatnot. So there's that.
Yeah, I think that's more of a bootcamp.
It's
program.
It's
Paid.
Yeah, it's paid, and I forgot how long it is. I'm sure it's like 10 or 12 weeks. 3 months? Okay, yeah.
12 weeks.
So yeah, they're having open enrollment, I think now or soon, if anyone is.
Yeah, they opened up yesterday.
Did that?
Yeah, so one of my friends was like asking me. Yeah, you should probably look into it.
Yeah, so if anyone wants more information about the code school, just go to suncoast.io and you can apply or find out more of those useful links. And there's usually a few other organizers here. I'm sure if you come to the meetups, you might have met them or have seen them. But yeah. Is this anyone's like first meetup? I feel like I've seen a few of you.
It's my first meetup with this group.
Mm-hmm. Cool. We're always looking for feedback and like what kind of talks to give. So if you go to the Slack channel, and I'm trying to think of what channel to post, but
JavaScript.
Yeah, just go to the JavaScript channel. That's where everyone's at, and just like mention topics you'd like to talk about, because I would like to give more talks. It's just kind of like what do people want to learn about or hear about. So if there's anything you want, it's almost like getting a free class for yourself. Just pick what you want. I'm sure there's some eager fellow, possibly me, who will just like learn it and then teach it.
You can talk about like other function programming in JavaScript.
You can talk about anything.
It's whoever's allowed.
It's very open. Really, it seems to be Vue and React dominated. Just because those are the people giving talks. But if if you wanted to give a talk about functional programming or even go into like a different language, like crypto or functional programming or a framework or literally anything.
Oh, that was just a joke because it seems to be dominating. Like functional programming talk.
Oh, true. I haven't had functional programming talk. I thought there was just one.
No, he means like in that channel, the functional programming evangelists are the most vocal.
Oh, true. I've been looking at
And
the channel.
very opinionated, which may or may not be represent that community.
Yeah, so if you want, just bring in some new opinions and shake things up. Yeah.
No, I agree.
Oh, okay.
Oh, if you guys want, so I mentioned Mike Bostock a bunch of times. I have some resource links in there, and I'm pretty sure that I have, he's in there. There's Jeffrey Heer, which is kind of like his mentor. He's a professor at the University of Washington. Love that guy too. I don't know. I've been all about this stuff. Data visualization is like everything that I think about now. But there's him and Mike Bostock and Elijah Meeks, Sarah Drasnar, which is actually on the core team of Vue, but she does a lot of stuff with SVGs as well. But if you wanted to see, because Mike Bostock is like huge on examples, right? I mean, trying to explain this data visualization, just make an example. Now, he has this place called Observable. Now, this is kind of cool because this has this reactive system. And when I was talking about the whole A equals B, like that's from his talk. I put in a link to his keynote, but I mean, honestly, watch the whole thing. It's so informative. But if you go to this site, you can dive into some D3 stuff. I mean, here's a hierarchical radial tidy tree. So you could imagine this could be your dependency graph, right, of whatever project you spit out. So instead of a tree map that you would get, like if you did npm run build report, here I'll show you. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this, but if we do npm run build report, what that'll do is it'll generate my project. It'll show me my dependency graph, but then it gives me this holistic view of everything that my project is. And I can see right at a glance of what libraries are taking up the most space, or if there's like duplicate libraries. There's a Webpack, I think it's a Webpack plugin. It's the what is it called now? It takes all of these libraries that you might be reusing in all these different bundles. Yes. So this shows me exactly my hierarchy of my build. I can see that D3 clearly dominates all of the space that I'm using. Dash is right there, same with Vue. But here's some little Cora.js features that, but you can see, I mean, Chroma.js is a little color library. And this gives us our relational size to one another. So it's not just the size relational to everything. These are actually sizing themselves based off of all the other sizes of everything else. It gives us this good sense of things. So one thing to point out, this is a tree map, okay? This is created by this place called Foam Tree, but D3 has a tree map. And you could take your stats, Webpack can generate out a stats JSON file that gives you your entire hierarchy and all the information about it. It's all the stuff that's used to show this. But you could make your own tree map. Or you can make your own circle packing layout, right? D3 has all these things. If you guys don't know what the circle pack layout is, let me show you real quick. Let me go to blocks. Here's Mike Bostock's stuff. And all of these here, you could probably create components into Vue. These are the examples that he talks about. So let me see. There's probably a tree map somewhere in here. Okay, so here's a tree map, another tree map. That one on the right there, that's a circle packing layout. Okay, and it essentially shows everything here, but it shows the like how things are nested. And if we look at this, we can see here that you're visualizing kind of the same type of data structure. It's hierarchical data. It's data that's nested and nested and nested. So this can essentially be a tree map. You can use D3 and say if you didn't want your report to look like a tree map, make it a circle packing chart. Why not? And the whole thing is that no matter what you do, D3 is more so transforming the data. It's not rendering it. It gives you the control of doing that. So something as complex than this, you can approach this with the same kind of pattern that you did with just the shapes. And you would still get scope, right? If I made this thing and I did this loop of everything, and I wanted it so that when I clicked on any one of these, it could open up a new page and go to, I don't know, something, do whatever. We can by doing the same pattern, by adding the on-click, whatever, making these reusable. And obviously this, might not be something that you'd want. It's like a small little thing, but, a line, you can make a line be a part of a big, graph that has a bunch of lines, or you can make it a small little inline little SVG that could represent data across like multiple items if you wanted to kind of look at them all at once and see. We do that with thread arcs. Do you guys know what thread arcs are? Thread arcs is this really cool concept. I think IBM came up with it, but if you ever wanted to see like a conversation, if you have an email, you have a thread of emails and they go back and forth and all this stuff. And so a thread arc, it allows you to use the x-axis as a chronological order, right? So if you had a bunch of emails, here's the points in which the emails were taken. But if you wanted to see the relationship to one of the two, normally you can have like a tree list type thing, but this thread arc idea is it draws a little arc to that, and you can change it so that it's not chronological. You can make it so that they're closer depending on if they have more relation to one another, making it so that arcs that are from far away can get closer. And it allows you to kind of use it. I don't have an example, but this whole thread arc thing, you can use that as a way to, you can make it small and you can put this little thread arc into, let's say, a list of emails. And you can maybe color code it to see like, well, this one is red because it has the most connections, or this one's blue, it has very little. And you can kind of see this arc thing. It's a cool way to represent it because you can make it shrink to be very small. So yeah, look through those and check them out.
Have you done anything in 3D yet?
No, but I definitely am gonna. 3.js is right up my alley. There's also another one that I just heard of, is like something GL. I'll have to.
The one from Uber?
Is it from Uber?
I think Uber did a bunch with it. DeckGL.
I want to say it starts with like an M. Or, I'm sorry, an R.
Are there any 3D graphs or tables available in E3? Yeah. Like use the index or something?
I mean, well, I guess you could. The math is there. Mm-hmm. There's actually all that geo stuff. This, you can use geo to generate a globe. And you can give it its axes and stuff to actually change it, or you can even rotate it. Bostock did that in his keynote. But yeah, I would say though that here's the other thing. Okay, all this stuff that we're doing, it's all in an SVG format. Everything is vector. If you have thousands and thousands of points, you probably don't want thousands and thousands of DOM elements inside of your SVG, right? So in certain cases like that, you can really kind of extend your components so that instead of using the template, give it access to a canvas and put in a render function there and make it a little bit more complex. But instead of it using, instead of it drawing based on these, what these are, it would be a lot more efficient if we made it so that it was just rasterizing a bitmap, So in some cases, the template itself, the template way of things with Vue, might not work in your favor. But if not, I mean, make something that Vue can handle that. Point is that you could just take Vue in D3 and say, oh, I want to visualize this, and then you could just do it with almost no problem at all. But yeah, go through that site. They got a lot of really cool stuff. Blocks.org. I have a lot of links in the README. I mean, I don't think I miss a lot.
One more question in the back.
Yes.
Have you found any good D3 or other data visualizations for like state machines? If you have like the thing is active, the thing is archived, the thing is being worked on? Or whatever? Like,
Um,
kind of like this, state diagrams to documentation.
I personally have not. I hope I will in the future. I mean, to be honest, like, I'm a beginner with D3. I know a little bit, but there's no way that I'd be able to go to the blocks that Mike has on there and be able to create any of those things without actually fiddling around and figuring it out. But yeah, I mean, I'm assuming that you probably could. There's another one too. It's called cross filter. Have you guys heard of that? So cross filter allows you to filter on all dimensions all at once. So this shows a really good example of that, but it does it really, really quickly. So here, check this out. So this is about 250,000 items for these airports and the time of day that they've landed or when they've arrived, the distance. Okay, so you have all of these quantitative dimensions in this data set. And so if you wanted to filter one of these dimensions and get a result with all these other ones, let's say you only want to show the ones that have more than 200 miles of distance, you can filter those, but you want all of the other ones to then change, right? You can do this. This is one of the coolest things for me is you can go like this, and now you're crawling across all these dimensions, and they're doing some bitwise crazy stuff to be able to manage this. But this is 250,000 items that are changing like that. Like it's really, really fast. So I would recommend playing around with this too. Yeah, this one is awesome. I don't know how they do this, how they figure this stuff out.
Let's give Jonathan another round of applause. That was freaking awesome. Remember, there's suncoast.io. Join the Slack and start posting in the channel and be like, tell me cool stuff, help me out.
Should we put our chairs back?
If someone wants to stay by our staff and help me put some of the extra chairs back, that'd be appreciated. It shouldn't take too long. 4 chairs to a row.
Oops.